You spent 13 years in a classroom. You learned the quadratic formula. You memorized the parts of a cell. You could probably still name every state capital if someone gave you a minute if you had to. But nobody ever sat you down and explained what a credit score actually is, or why your paycheck is smaller than your salary, or how a bank quietly makes money off the number sitting in your checking account right now. That wasn't an oversight. It was a design choice. And the real answer is far stranger than the curriculum got crowded. Here's what financial literacy actually is, why it was never taught to you on purpose, and what it's quietly costing you every single month that you go without it. Start with the definition, because most people get it wrong. Financial literacy isn't knowing how to budget. It isn't knowing how to open a savings account. Those are financial skills. Financial literacy is something deeper. It's understanding how money behaves over time, how debt compounds against you the same way investing compounds for you, and how the systems around you are built to profit from your confusion. Economist Anna Maria Lusardi has spent decades studying this exact gap. Her research, conducted alongside colleagues at the Global Financial Literacy Excellence Center, tracks a simple set of questions given to adults around the world. Questions about interest rates, inflation, and risk diversification. Nothing advanced, nothing you'd need a finance degree to answer. Most adults fail. Not fail as in struggle. Fail as in cannot correctly answer basic questions about the money they use every single day. And here's the detail that should bother you. That failure rate barely changes based on income. Doctors miss these questions. Engineers miss these questions. People with more education than you can imagine still can't explain what compound interest does to a loan over 10 years. So if it isn't intelligence, what is it? It's exposure. You cannot understand a system nobody ever showed you the inside of.
Think about how school actually prepared you for adulthood. You learned to analyze a poem's symbolism, but never analyzed a loan's amortization schedule. You learned the causes of a war fought 2 centuries ago, but never learned why your student loan interest capitalizes while you're still in school. You learned to balance a chemical equation, but nobody taught you to balance a monthly budget against a paycheck that never quite covers what you thought it would. Why? The honest answer involves history, incentives, and a system that was never actually built to make you financially independent. Public education in most Western countries was shaped in the industrial era, when the goal was producing reliable, compliant workers, not confident capital allocators. Schools optimized for punctuality, obedience, and standardized output. A financially literate population, one that understood debt, leverage, and negotiation, wasn't the priority. A population that shows up on time and doesn't ask too many questions about the system was.
That's not a conspiracy. It's just incentives lining up in a direction nobody bothered to correct. And once you left school, the gap didn't close. It got exploited. Every financial product you've ever signed up for was designed by someone whose job is to understand behavioral psychology better than you do. Your credit card's minimum payment isn't a convenience. It's a number calculated to keep you in debt for as long as legally possible, while still feeling like you're doing the responsible thing. This is where behavioral economics enters the picture, and where the story stops being about ignorance and starts being about design. Richard Thaler, the Nobel laureate whose work reshaped how economists think about human decision-making, spent his career proving something uncomfortable. People don't make financial decisions rationally. They make them emotionally, then justify them with logic afterward. Thaler's research showed that people will happily sign up for a savings plan that increases their contributions automatically over time, something he called Save More Tomorrow, but almost never choose to increase those contributions manually, even when it's clearly in their own interest.
Read that twice. The exact same financial outcome,
One version requires willpower. The other requires nothing but a default setting. And the version requiring nothing wins almost every time. Now, ask yourself who else knows this. Every subscription service that makes cancellation 3 clicks harder than sign up. Every store that puts the impulse items at the checkout line, timed for the exact moment your willpower is lowest. Every buy now, pay later app that turns a $200 purchase into 4 easy payments, specifically because $80 in 4 parts feels smaller than $320 total, even though the math is identical. None of this is illegal. All of it is intentional, and you were never taught to see it, because seeing it would make you a harder customer to profit from.
Here's a number that should stop you cold. According to the same research tracking financial literacy over the past decade, the gap hasn't narrowed. It's widened. Financial products have become more complex, faster to access, and easier to misuse, while the average person's understanding of how they work has stayed roughly the same. You are, statistically, less prepared for the financial system you live inside today than your parents were for the one they lived inside 30 years ago. Sit with that for a second. The tools got sharper. The instructions never came. But here's the part that should really unsettle you. It isn't just banks and retailers exploiting the gap. It's the exact institutions you were told to trust the most.
Think about the last time someone explained your paycheck to you in detail. Not the number at the top, the number that actually lands in your account. Between income tax, payroll deductions, and benefits withholding, a meaningful percentage of your earnings disappears before you ever see it. And almost nobody outside a finance role can explain exactly where each piece goes or why. You were handed a system with dozens of moving parts and told to simply trust the total. Insurance works the same way. Every policy you own, whether it covers your car, your health, or your home, is priced using models built by actuaries who have spent entire careers calculating risk down to the decimal point. You, on the other hand, are handed a document written in language specifically designed to be technically accurate and practically unreadable. The company understands exactly what you're buying. You're often guessing. And then there's the biggest one of all, retirement. Ask most people what the difference is between a traditional retirement account and a Roth version, and you'll get a shrug. Or worse, a confident wrong answer. That single distinction, taxed now versus taxed later, can shift your retirement outcome by tens of thousands of dollars, depending on your income and timeline. It's arguably one of the most consequential financial decisions of your entire working life. And it's usually made in a few rushed minutes during new hire paperwork by someone who has never once had it properly explained to them. Before going further, if this reframe is landing for you, take a second and hit like. Drop a comment with your biggest money question, and subscribe to After Tax Academy. Turn on notifications too, because the next few minutes are about to get a lot more specific about what you can actually do with this. So what does real financial literacy actually look like, stripped of jargon? It starts with understanding the difference between price and cost. The price of a car is the number on the sticker. The cost is that number plus interest, plus insurance, plus depreciation, plus every month you're locked into a payment instead of building savings. Financially literate people evaluate cost. Everyone else evaluates price and then wonders where their money went. It continues with understanding leverage in both directions. Debt used to buy an appreciating asset, like a reasonably priced home or an education that measurably increases your earning power, can build wealth. Debt used to buy a depreciating asset, like a car that loses value the moment you drive it off the lot, does the opposite. Same word, opposite outcome. Nobody ever draws you that distinction, so most people treat all debt the same, which means they treat good debt with fear and bad debt with comfort, exactly backwards. And it requires understanding your own psychology Because that, more than any spreadsheet, determines your financial life. This is where Nobel laureate Daniel Kahneman's research becomes essential, even outside a classroom. Kahneman spent his career documenting loss aversion, the finding that losing $100 feels roughly twice as painful as gaining $100 feels good. That single asymmetry explains why people hold on to losing investments too long, hoping to avoid locking in a loss, while selling winning investments too early, desperate to lock in a gain. It explains why a limited time discount feels urgent, even when you didn't need the item yesterday. Your brain isn't broken. It's just running ancient wiring in a modern financial world it was never built for. Which brings you to the real cost of financial illiteracy, the part that doesn't show up on any single bill. It isn't one bad decision. It's the compounding of 1,000 small ones made without context over decades. It's the credit card carried a little too long in your 20s. It's the retirement account you didn't open at 22 because nobody explained what compound growth actually does over 40 years. And by the time someone did explain it, a decade of growth was already gone, permanently, because time is the one financial resource you cannot get back. Here's the twist most people never expect. Financial literacy was never actually complicated. It was made to feel complicated, because confusion is profitable, and clarity isn't something anyone was incentivized to sell you. The entire industry built around personal finance has a quiet interest in making it look harder than it is. Complex jargon, dense paperwork, and 30-page disclosures aren't accidents of bureaucracy. They're friction, deliberately placed between you and understanding, because a confused customer asks fewer questions and accepts more fees. So here's the question worth sitting with. If the principles are actually simple, why does almost every financial company spend millions of dollars making them sound complicated instead of just explaining them to make them sound complicated instead of just explaining them? The answer is the same one you've been circling this entire time. A customer who understands the game asks harder questions, negotiates better terms, and walks away from bad offers. A customer who doesn't just signs where they're told to sign. Underneath all of it, the actual principles are almost embarrassingly simple. Spend less than you earn. Let time and compound growth work in your favor instead of against you. Understand the difference between an asset and a liability. Question every financial product designed to feel urgent. That's most of it. Not complicated, just never taught. It also means unlearning a few things school quietly implied without ever saying outright. That a steady paycheck alone equals security. That a mortgage is automatically a smart investment. That the stock market is a form of gambling reserved for people who already have money to spare. None of those are entirely true, and none of those were ever meaningfully tested against the numbers in a classroom. They were absorbed, unchallenged, the same way you absorbed which fork to use at a formal dinner. Nobody taught it directly. You just picked it up from the air around you, and it became the invisible operating system running your financial decisions for the rest of your life. Real financial literacy means going back and questioning that operating system line by line. Is a rented apartment actually throwing money away, or is it flexibility with a price attached, the same way insurance is? Is a stable job with no equity actually safer long-term than building a skill that lets you negotiate your worth every few years? These aren't questions with universal answers, but they're questions you're finally equipped to actually ask, instead of just inheriting someone else's answer by default. So where does that leave you now? It leaves you in the position everyone eventually reaches, whether at 25 or 55. The moment you realize the system was never going to teach you this, and the only path forward is teaching yourself. That doesn't mean enrolling in another course or waiting until you feel ready or reading a 500-page book before you're allowed to start. It means a handful of small, repeatable habits that compound the same way money does. Read the terms before you sign, even the boring parts, especially the boring parts, because the boring parts are usually where the cost is hiding. Ask what a fee is actually for, out loud, to whoever is charging it, because a legitimate fee survives that question, and a predatory one usually doesn't. Understand what compound interest does to both your savings and your debt, because it's the same mathematical force working for you in one account and against you in the other, and the only difference is which side of it you're standing on.
Question urgency. Nothing that's actually good for your long-term finances requires a decision in the next 10 minutes. Question convenience, too, because convenience is often the price tag in disguise, the extra few % you pay so you don't have to think. Every financial decision that feels frictionless was probably engineered to feel that way, for someone else's benefit, not yours. And maybe most importantly, stop treating financial confusion as a personal failing. It isn't a character flaw that you weren't taught this. It was never on the syllabus. The shame that keeps people from asking basic money questions out loud, the fear of sounding uninformed in a meeting with a banker or a broker or an advisor, that shame is doing exactly what an uneven system needs it to do. It keeps you quiet. Quiet customers ask fewer questions. Fewer questions mean more room for someone else's fine print to work in their favor instead of yours. The moment you stop being quiet is the moment the entire dynamic shifts.
None of this requires a finance degree. It requires curiosity applied consistently, in small doses over a long period of time, which happens to be the exact same formula that makes compound interest so powerful in the first place. The habit of asking one more question before you sign, before you swipe, before you accept the default option is itself a compounding asset. It gets easier every time you use it, and it pays out for the rest of your life. You spent 13 years in a classroom. Nobody taught you what your paycheck actually means, what your credit score actually measures, or why the system profits every time you don't ask. But you're not in that classroom anymore. The lesson finally arrived. Late, but not too late. And for the first time, you're the one deciding what you do with it.